Now I'd like to introduce our speaker for the day. People would have noticed someone in slightly different attire to the rest of us today. The Police Commissioner, Grant Stevens. Grant's making his second appearance. He was inducted as an honorary member some time back, and prior to that he was due to speak here, and due to illness he sent his deputy along, Deputy Commissioner DeVow, and that was an interesting speak, but Grant said he would honour his commitment to speak at the Rotary Club, and here he is today to speak to you about contemporary challenges for policing in South Australia. Thank you, Grant.
Thank you very much, and might I point out that I was a last-minute apology for the last time I was scheduled to speak because I was a bit unwell, and as it turns out, I've just had the last 2 days off sick, but dragged myself away from my deathbed to come along today. So please apologise if I go into a coughing fit or seem to be struggling for breath. The topic of my presentation today is about the the challenges that face policing in a modern society, and it probably won't come as any surprise to you all about some of the things that I'm going to talk about, and I'll just talk briefly about a few things. But I wanted to start off by talking about the fact that police services around the world are vested with some principal accountabilities that never change, and these are written into the Police Act in South Australia, and they're called our core functions. And our core functions in South Australia are that we are vested with the responsibility for preventing crime, for detecting offenders when crimes are committed and holding people to account for their behaviours, to assist members of the public in times of personal emergency, and this unfortunately in South Australia we sort of prepare ourselves for that type of eventuality every bushfire season. And of course road safety also fits within our core responsibilities as a police service, is to contribute to safer roads in South Australia. So those things never change, they exist day in, day out, and we align our resources to achieving those sorts of objectives. But there are things that do change within that context, and these are what we call our policing priorities. And every year there's an agency called the Australian New Zealand Policing Advisory Agency, which is made up of a range of research officers, and it's chaired by all the commissioners of police. And that body undertakes work to establish what the emerging trends are, where we need to be placing our resources, and how we can best serve the communities that we are responsible for providing safety to. We don't often see a lot of change over the 3 to 5 year period in terms of what those priorities are, and the priorities we're facing today have been, I believe, priorities that we've been allocating resources to for some time, and I just want to run through a few of those. The first one I want to talk about is domestic violence. Some people may have heard domestic violence being spoken about like it's an epidemic. There's this new plague that's hit our community called DV, domestic abuse, family violence, and I take a different view to that. This is not something that's emerging within our communities and within our relationships with each other. This is a factor or a feature of our society that's been around for decades, hundreds of years. The way men treat women, and what we're seeing today is a greater awareness within our community about this imbalance, about the way men feel the need to exert power over women and some of the manifestations of that exertion of power. So as a policing service, our obligation is to respond and react and to prevent further harm. There are a range of other agencies that work with domestic violence related activities, and their focus is more about prevention. As a policing service, our role is to respond when a person calls for help. As a police commissioner, it would be highly unusual that you would expect me to stand up here and tell you that I'm very pleased to see an increase in crime reporting figures. I can say though, when it comes to domestic violence, we've seen an increase over the last financial year of about 12% in reported crime that relates to domestic violence, and I see that as a very positive sign. Whilst we're normally trying to get crime down, and I'll go to the government and tell them, I'll give them all sorts of excuses as to why crime might be going up in certain categories, this is the one category of crime where I go to the government and say, we should be really excited about this, because what it tells us is the community understand the nature of the behaviour, they find it abhorrent, and the people who are the victims of domestic violence have confidence in the police, they have confidence in the judicial system, and the confidence in the support networks that can assist them in dealing with a domestic violence situation. They're coming and telling us about it, which means we actually get a sense of the problem, and we have a greater capacity to actually prevent it from happening in the future. So domestic violence for the last few years has really featured in terms of how we determine where we need to place our resources, and I see it being a continuing feature for several years as the community grapples with this concept that's been a part of how we interrelate and something we need to be focusing on going forward. The second priority and challenge that I would like to talk about is a bit of a two-edged sword for us, and it's the issue of cyber crime, technology. We are seeing today traditional crimes being committed in different ways that we never anticipated because of the emergence of or the advances in technology and the cyber environment. We have a situation where people can be living in another country committing crimes against South Australian citizens, and our capacity to investigate and hold those people to account for their criminal acts is very limited. It's also the fact that new crimes are being committed. People are using technology in ways that no one ever anticipated when we saw these advances in technologies. We have these new opportunities, new capacities. Well, there's an element of our community who always look to exploit new opportunities for inappropriate purposes. So we are now identifying new crimes being committed, and we are looking at how we can actually tailor our policing response to deal with these new crimes. What that calls upon policing to do is to work collaboratively with police forces in other jurisdictions in Australia, to work closely with the Australian Federal Police, who has an overarching responsibility for global crime, and to work with our partners in other countries as well. So we're sharing information and we're acting on each other's behalf when we identify crimes which are being committed across international borders. That does come with some challenges, there's no doubt about that. The other aspect of cyber, which I see as an opportunity, is the fact that it's equipping us with the tools to investigate crimes in ways we've never been able to do it before in the past. And a really good example of that, and it might not be related to computers, which is what everybody thinks about when we talk about cyber or technology, is the advances in the DNA technology that enable us to investigate crimes and identify offenders for crimes which were committed decades ago. A really good example of that one is the disappearance of Louise Bell from her bedroom in 1986, an unsolved crime in South Australia up until recently. Louise was taken from her bedroom, and the only thing that we found after the crime had been committed was her pyjama top. As a result of the changes and advances in DNA technology and using the best resources from around the world, we sent samples of that pyjama top to the Netherlands, who are held to be the most advanced DNA analysis laboratories in the world, and they came back with a result that enabled us to prosecute a person by the name of Dieter Pfennig for the Louise Bell murder. And you may have been seeing in the papers that the Louise Bell case has been going through the courts, and we're now waiting for a judgment from the judge who conducted that trial in terms of the guilt of Dieter Pfennig. But the indications are that the fact that we're able to launch a prosecution against a person for a crime which was committed in 1986 as a result of advances in technology that are occurring today is evidence of the fact that whilst we struggle with the challenges presented by technology and cyber, we need to embrace the opportunities that come with it as well. We were talking just briefly about the head of major crime, Superintendent Des Bray, a very energetic man, and even he is pulling his hair out as to how he's going to be able to manage all of the investigations that we're able to reopen as a result of advances in technology. So another aspect of technology, cyber, that creates challenges for us is probably every single person in this room and almost every single person out there is carrying around a mobile phone which they record events on. And if you happen to do the wrong thing and we need to investigate you for a crime, then the chances are I have to get a team of cyber experts to download your mobile phone calls, have a look at your text messages, look at what websites you've been accessing, check your emails, look at any iPads or tablets that you might have to see if there's any evidence to support the crime that we're investigating. So it takes more resources from us to properly conduct these investigations. There's not a single major incident, not a single major indictable crime that occurs today that doesn't have an element of cyber. So I'm challenged with putting enough resources in to ensure that we do those investigations in a timely way. And much to the court's distress, I don't think they think we do it fast enough. The third element that I'd like to talk about in terms of a challenge or a priority for policing is the threat of terrorism. And I know that my counterpart Scott Duval spoke about terrorism when he came and stood in for me the last time I was scheduled to speak. But it is a real concern for us in policing in terms of fulfilling our obligation to ensure that South Australians feel safe within their community. Over the last few years, we've had about 9 incidents, terrorist-related incidents in Australia, which have been prevented through good policing. Fortunately, none of those have happened in South Australia. We're extremely lucky as South Australians that we enjoy a different dynamic to other communities within South Australia. We are a smaller community, we have better relationships with all aspects of our community, and we leverage from those relationships to share information and to obtain information. Having said that though, the threat for us comes out of the fact that we're not likely to see a 9/11 style terrorist event or a Mumbai type event where there's a highly organised group of individuals who plan a very large scale attack on a facility or on a building or on a public event. The reality is we are more likely to be faced with a scenario where a person who we would call a lone actor, one person who we don't know about, has been radicalised through the internet and makes a decision that they're going to commit an act of terrorism in their community. We don't know who this person is. It's potentially a 15, 16-year-old child who has fallen into a cohort that encourages them to do something drastic. They're impressionable, they're disenfranchised, and they take steps and they conduct an act which we can't see coming. And the sad reality is, and I think our former Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, once said, all you need is a mobile phone, a sharp knife and an ISIS flag and you're ready to go. The other factor for us is all the indications are in Australia so far that the targets of any planned terrorist attack by a lone actor are going to be police officers or members of the Defence Force. And the indications are predominantly it's going to be police officers because we're out in the community, we're easy to find, and it strikes to the heart of public safety if you can attack a police officer. So my challenge as the Commissioner is to ensure that my workforce feel that they're properly equipped, properly trained and supported to do their job as safely as they can so they can provide a safe environment to the workforce. My other challenge is, and it would be quite easy to just shut police station doors, to put 3 police officers in every patrol car, to not go out after 9 o'clock unless we're called for by someone who's calling for assistance. But I need to ensure that we continue to maintain the level of service that the community of South Australia has grown to expect from its South Australian Police Force. So I need to balance my officers' safety and sense of security with the obligation to ensure that the community of South Australia gets the policing service they require. And if you need help, you can call the police and we'll be able to respond within the timeframes we set as acceptable limits. So there are some serious challenges coming out of terrorism. Firstly, it's being able to identify the people who are going to commit these atrocities. And as I said, if it's a 15-year-old kid who's looking for someone to follow and they choose the wrong group on the internet, then we are going to struggle to identify that person before they do the wrong thing. And then we have to ensure that our police service is able to do its job as safely as possible. Another challenge that people don't think about very much when we talk about policing is the challenge of diversity, and this is a priority for the South Australia Police. Most modern police services are founded on the principles of a former police officer, Sir Robert Peel, from the early 1800s. Sir Robert Peel came up with a range of principles that have dictated how policing has been conducted in civilised societies since he came up with these 9 points. One of those points is that the police are the community and the community are the police. And if you sort of pull that to pieces and analyse it, what it's telling us is that the police service must reflect the community it serves. Now, we're in a changing environment where what used to be a predominantly Anglo-Saxon, white, male workforce has been forced to make changes to ensure that we do properly reflect the community we serve. We are a multicultural community. We enjoy diversity in South Australia, and we should see that diversity within the police force as well. One of the big challenges for us is to see more women recognising policing as a career and enabling women to take up the role of policing. We currently have about 1,200 female police officers out of a workforce of about 4,600. That represents about 30%. My goal is to ensure that we open up our doors to policing to women, and that they recognise the fact that there are tremendous opportunities for them to contribute and to change the way the organisation thinks about problem solving, responding to incidents and managing the role of policing and public safety. It's been shown time and time again through research that a diverse workforce is more responsive, adaptive and capable of delivering the services that the community requires. So we've put steps in place to ensure that we can open up our doors to women and to encourage more women to come through our recruiting process and join SAPOL. It's not just policing that's doing this, it's right across the public sector, but we want to be seen as leaders. Given that we're a male-dominated organisation, I think there are tremendous opportunities for us to actually lead the way and show that we're genuine about change, but it will take some work on our behalf. The other aspect that is also a challenge for us is resource management. And this comes about as a result of the fact that we are a government agency and our appropriations come from government. That's our budget. You know, we're allocated a budget every year by the state government, and we need to cut our cloth in such a way that we're able to deliver against our core functions, those things that we're expected to do every single day, and also take on some of these new priorities as they're emerging. What that means is we are continually reviewing and analysing the expectations of the community, what they want us to do, and aligning that with what we should be doing. It means we have to look at new ways of doing business, and it means we have to look back into that technology environment and seize upon opportunities to become more efficient with using our police officer resources because of the ability to tap into technology. A good example of that is that we're developing a more significant online presence where now if you have a minor collision you can report your collision online rather than going to see a police officer, or I don't have to task a police patrol to your minor crash. If you have lost property or a low-level crime, you can report that online. If you're unfortunate enough to get caught speeding and you want to check out the photograph to make sure that it's you and not your children, it's usually the kids, you can go online now and have a look at the photo rather than having to come into a police station. So we're making our services as accessible as possible. We're making sure that our telephone services are adaptive and that we have qualified people who are able to give more detailed advice over the phone, because quite often, rather than someone ringing up, giving some scant details, a police officer or a public servant taking a little bit of information and sending a patrol, if we spend a bit more time on the phone and we get that right, we can quite often resolve a person's concerns simply by giving them the information and advice they need over the phone, by listening a little bit more and giving that right information. The other aspect to it as well is, and I suppose this has been a feature of the media over the last few weeks, is making decisions like adjusting police station front counter opening hours. There's been a little bit of an outcry by some people within the community saying that this is a reduction in services. I see it completely differently, which may be of no surprise since it was my decision. But by adjusting our police station hours, and I'm talking about small police stations that are open for essentially administrative tasks, by changing them to business hours, 9 till 5 as opposed to 8:30 until 11:30 at night, I can put 37 extra police officers out on patrol. Now, to my way of thinking, if a person needs assistance from the police, they're going to ring 000 or they're going to ring 131 444. The best way for me to get to provide an assistance or a resource to that person is if they're in a patrol car, mobile, ready to respond. The other thing that happens when I put 37 extra police out in the community, it means that those police, when they're not being tasked with a job, are being proactive in their patrol activity, concentrating on those hotspots where we know crime occurs. If they're sitting in a police station at 9 o'clock at night, waiting for a customer to walk in who needs an affidavit signed or wants to register their firearm, I'll bet you they're right up to date with what's happening on The Bachelor or on the latest cooking show, but they're not actually providing a service to the community. So we do make these decisions. We make the decisions in the best interest of the community and to make sure we get the best value out of our resources. So there are some challenges that we're facing, and one of my challenges I know is to keep within the time limit today, and I haven't been paying attention. But I would also like to provide an opportunity for anyone who might have a question to ask. If you would like to ask questions, I'm more than happy to take those. And prior to that, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to give you some insights as to where I see the challenges for policing as we go forward.
Thank you, Grant. You follow a fine tradition of honorary members of our club as police commissioners, and you're welcome.
Thank you.
You mentioned media, and you mentioned the three topics. Sort of a question-type comment. It seems to us, as the members of the public, that the media's inability to comment on some issues due to restraining or suppression orders allows them then to feed off matters of the last, the terrorism exercise. And I'm alluding to the inquiry in New South Wales,
Yes.
where decisions made on the night with a whole lot of pressure and a whole lot of issues and a chain of command situation, the media seems to have said, well, why weren't you on the job? Similar to the bushfires with Commissioner Nixon a few years ago. So I'm just wondering how you as a policeman, as a person, obviously as a commissioner, how do you feel about the role of the media? I know you need them, but how do you feel about them?
Do we have any members of the media here today? That only goes so far. Yeah. Sorry? Look, let me say this. I think the Lint Cafe siege is a really good example of some of the challenges we face from a policing point of view. And we have an inquest happening in South Australia at the moment. Humbles is the young man, 17-year-old, who shot McPherson on New Year's Eve back in 2012. We are spoon-fed information on a daily basis, and we have access to this information through social media and online news forums, as well as the mainstream media as well. And we hear information on a daily basis about these inquests as they're unfolding. That information is reported as fact. And we form our opinions about the effectiveness or conduct of a police service or other people based on what we see on a daily basis. What we often don't see or get to analyse completely are the findings of the coroner or the person who is conducting that inquiry. So the coroner will listen to everything and make a determination, having heard all of the material, about who did what, who did well, who did not do so well. When we get spoon-fed by the media on a daily basis, it is reported as this is what's happened. And I think the Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioner in New South Wales, who have been absolutely roasted by the media, have been basically tried and convicted in the court of public opinion before the coroner has actually made their determination. It's unfortunate that when the coroner does make its determination, that might be page 18 as opposed to page 1. And we might never, as a community, we might really not know the truth of that. The media is it is essential to how we inform the community, but I think there are some challenges that come with the access we have to information at the moment. A good example of that is we have break-ins every day. We have people whose homes are invaded by intruders. It is not that prevalent in South Australia, but when you see it on your social news feed, and you see that there was one in Elizabeth North, there was one in Hackham West, there was one in Western Suburbs, there was one in Eastern Suburbs, you're not actually analysing that information thinking, well, nothing's actually happened around me, and there were only 4 incidents overnight in a community of 1.6 million people. Yeah, you become more attuned to the fact that crime is occurring, and that makes it a challenge for us to ensure people feel safe within their communities when they have every right to feel safe, and the media has a part to play in that.
Thank you, Grant. My daughter was in the police force about 10 years ago.
Does she want to rejoin? I'm on a recruiting drive.
Pardon?
Does she want to rejoin? I'm on a recruiting drive.
She's coming back to Adelaide next week, but I don't know if she wanted to rejoin. One of her biggest fears, I recall, other than facing the bikies down at Beachport a number of years ago, was going into domestic violence. They felt that as a patrol car going out, being called out, that's when they feared for their life because of the dangers of perhaps the male getting abused. Have you changed the training, or how do you cope? How do the young guys and girls cope with going into domestic violence?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think that's a reality. Is the most volatile situation that police officers attend is the domestic violence situation, and I often reflect on the fact that when I was a 20-year-old graduate of the police academy out on my first patrols attending domestic violence situations with a 45, 50-year-old man and woman, me giving them advice was never going to go very well. But it is volatile, it is dangerous. We have dramatically improved our training. Our operational safety training is, I think, second to none in Australia. And the training that we give specifically to responding to domestic violence incidents and managing domestic violence is a real feature of how we teach our cadets, and it's part of our ongoing training for police as well. And the other aspect of that is making sure that they have the right equipment. And we give our officers tasers now, they have capsicum spray, and they have a baton and a firearm, because the last thing I want them to do is to draw a firearm because they don't have any other options. So if they can use a less lethal option in a domestic violence situation, then that's better for everybody.
Yes, Grant. My question is about the extra levy that gets applied on a speeding fine for body corporate. It just came to my attention that in Victoria it's considerably different to what it is over here in South Australia, and it seems to me that is against our South Australian interest. I have to admit that seems to be a more reinforcing point to declare who was driving so that points can be deducted. Is this under review? What's your feel on the fact that there is only $300 in South Australia versus $3,000 or $2,500 over there?
I think if you ask the people who take advantage of the body corporate levy, that they'd like it to be as low as possible. We don't actually set the fines. We don't engage in the debate about the quantum that should be applied to the different aspects, such as the body corporate levy. And we stay out of that discussion as well, because you're probably all aware that the police get accused of revenue raising through road safety. And I can give you an absolute assurance that the only reason we're out on the roads and we're issuing expiation notices to people is because we're trying to change behaviour. We don't focus on the dollar amount. Our job is to enforce the road rules. And I think when you look at the recent distraction campaign that we run that was about people using their mobile phones, over 1,900 people detected in 1 month using their mobile phone, compared to the last time we ran that campaign where it was 600 people less. I don't think the dollar amount makes any difference. We need to do something more drastic to stop people from taking risks with their own lives and the lives of other people.
Commissioner, I read with interest my neighbourhood watch notes from time to time, and it's quite obviously to me that you're very busy quite a lot of the time. How important is Neighbourhood Watch to your policing in our state?
Neighbourhood Watch is the longest community crime prevention program that's been running in Australia, second to none, and it provides an integral service to ensuring that people are informed about what's happening in their community, and also ensuring that the community is doing what it can to reduce opportunities for criminals. There's a range of different programs that Neighbourhood Watch undertake to deliver that outcome, and I wouldn't like to be part of a community that didn't have Neighbourhood Watch as a part of it. The challenge with Neighbourhood Watch for us is the age cohort. It's one of those community organisations people get involved in after retirement, and encouraging younger people to become members of an important organisation like Neighbourhood Watch is a challenge. We're actually changing the way we run Neighbourhood Watch to try and open it up to people. We're doing a full review at the moment, hopefully providing other mechanisms where people who don't have the time to attend meetings can still be involved and support Neighbourhood Watch. Very important.
All right, is that enough questions? Thank you. All right, Grant.
Thanks,
For
Rob.
me to thank you for presenting today, and a little token of our
Thank you very
esteem.
much.
And I'd just say that it's great to have the Commissioner of the most respected police force in Australia here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
And I ask... Thank you. And ask Darcy now to, as President, to close the meeting. Thank you.